to episode 8 of the Jolly Thoughts podcast. Man, today we've got an absolute doozy for you. We have the man, the myth, the Martel, Marc Martel, in fact. We'll have a little conversation with him about life at what it's like to be Marc Martel right now. If you don't know who he is, you can find out all about him with an easy Google search. You can also find him at marcmartelmusic.com. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. Used to travel together a little bit in some bands, and he is right now. I couldn't possibly recap kind of the entirety of his musical story, but you should know that he is essentially traveling the world in a couple of different capacities, and one of them is with a Queen. You can't really call it a tribute band or a cover band. It's like an experience where he is able to kind of embody the voice in some respects of Freddie Mercury. In fact, if you look up Marc Martel on YouTube, you'll find an overwhelming number of videos. At least one of them has 50. I think it has more than 50 million views at this point in time. That was his audition for this Ultimate Queen experience that he's a part of. But he's also just a fantastic writer who's done a lot of great work with a band called Downhere, which is the band that our paths crossed in. And so we talk a little bit about that. And actually, I open the episode with a little bit of a recap story of how we know each other. So I won't steal any of that thunder. But we talk about kind of traveling the world and how that is right now. We talk about music and how maybe live music could be seen as an essential service. We also kind of get into hierarchy of values, whether you can ultimately value safety or ultimately value personal freedom, whether you can value both at the same time and how. And we talk about the church. It's good. It's a fun time. I hope you'll enjoy it. We record this over Zoom, is how I do most of these. And so you'll hear our little banter at the beginning. We start because when you click record on a Zoom, this disembodied voice pops in and says, recording in progress, just so that you're not taken unawares with the recording. And so that's kind of what you hop into in the middle of the conversation, just for your own context. Hey, I hope you enjoy it. And here we go.
Oh, there it is. We got a single party consent state. No, this is a city single consent state. So you're good anyway.
Is that how this works? That's a beautiful thing.
In the States, there's some of the states, like, you can record people without their permission, and others you can't. I think most of the states you can't, but I think Tennessee you can.
Does it work? Does it matter which state the person who's recording is in, or which state the person who's
Yeah, that's probably it. Probably doesn't apply to you.
Nothing does. Yeah, that's a wacky system. But yes, it is official. You heard the little voice in your head say, "We're recording now." So, well, Marc, we're joining each other across the border because you're south of the border.
Mm-hmm.
Not down Mexico way, but you're down the United States
Not
way.
quite.
In Tennessee.
More than halfway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not quite.
I don't know. Have you ever? I mean, I don't want to ask if you've ever driven to Mexico from where you are, but
I don't believe so.
No, I kind of want to do that. But
no.
Pause for effect. It's funny. When we lined up this conversation, it forced me to think back to the first time that we traveled together with your band Downhere and the band that I was in at the time called The Silent. And it reminded me of a story which few people will find nearly as funny as I do, but it really sets up, I think, this conversation relatively well. And don't worry, it's not a story. It's nothing. It can be aired out loud, I promise. But there was a person who had traveled from Moncton to Fredericton, I believe, for a show that we'd done on that tour, and we were the opening act. Our band was the opening act for you guys. And we had done, it wasn't a big tour. I think we maybe did like 8 or 9 shows, just like a run across kind of Eastern Canada. But it was still one of the longest tours that I'd ever done. And so we were probably about 3 or 4 shows in, and I was like, man, my voice is kind of tired. And because I was more of a screamer than a singer, frankly. And this guy he will remain unnamed, a lovely gentleman, kind of came up to us, and it was kind of being complimentary about the concert and saying, hey, it was wonderful. Really glad to see you guys kind of coming into your own and doing great stuff. And he's kind of like concerned about your voice, though. It feels like maybe you're kind of pushing it a little bit there.
which, very kind of him to be concerned. And I was like, well, I appreciate that. I've actually been trying to glean a little bit of wisdom from Marc Martel to try to figure out, how to maintain healthy vocals on the road or whatever. And he kind of looked at me and said, don't, don't compare yourself. Don't compare yourself to Marc. He's world class. And so I was like, listen, I'm not in any way trying to compare myself to him. I just trying to, I just was hoping I could maybe learn a little bit from him. And he kind of leaned in close and I could tell that he was trying to really, catch my heart with this. Was like, he's world class.
Wow.
And I was at the moment I was equal parts embarrassed for myself, but also very just mostly embarrassed for him. It was a terribly embarrassing moment.
Oh
But the
man.
reason I bring it up is because it turns out that he was probably kind of right. Because since that point in time, you have literally traveled the world, brother. And so, I mean, there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about, but here's the first one that I want to talk to you about. What's the world like these days? You have left us and you've traveled abroad. What are you experiencing out there in the broader world, man?
So hungry for live music.
I bet.
But border controls are just not making it feasible really at this point. It's difficult. The first show we had overseas was Israel in April, and we had to get like 4 separate tests just for that trip, and we were only there for like 2 days, 3 days. Um, we've had several things shut down just very recently. I was supposed to be I was supposed to be in Africa last week in Zanzibar, where Freddie Mercury was born, and that got canceled like the day before we were supposed to leave. And also, a trip to Iceland got canceled a couple weeks before that.
Ugh.
So it's hard. We've got lots of international stuff coming up next week, next year. A huge Germany tour, huge that includes Austria, which is all over the news these days as a country and their regulations and all that stuff. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm happy to play as many domestic shows as we can,
Right.
but we've got so many fans because of this Queen thing overseas that it's hard not to be able to travel.
That's brutal. So do you think that maybe did you kind of plan a little bit optimistically, thinking that, hey, yeah,
Yeah,
certainly by the end of 2021 or by mid, like, oh yeah, definitely we'll be able to do those shows.
yeah, we're always optimistic for sure. I
Yeah.
think that's the way to go. But yeah, some of our trips overseas have been postponed 2, 3 times, and then we're trying to find the breaking point where people's patience just kind of wears out. But the fact that this is really a worldwide thing just makes everybody go, all right, well, I'll just keep waiting until they come, and hopefully my ticket's still good then. And it is. Your ticket's still good.
No expiration date on a ticket. I mean, how long were things shut down domestically for concerts? Like what was the moratorium on your shows? Like when did you
Well,
finally start doing shows?
2020, we actually did a few shows,
Okay.
and that was really a really sweet thing. I think after lockdown, I had a total of 7 shows in 2020. And that was coming off our biggest tour ever. Like we toured Germany, and it was speaking of vocal health, I lost my voice for my first time ever on that tour,
There you go.
and I got sick with something. Never got tested. Don't know
No.
what it was. But yeah, 7 shows in 2020, and I think all of them were outdoors, obviously, and you could just see the look on people's faces. I kept thinking while I was on stage, seeing the look on people's faces, and just the satisfaction and the joy that this live music was bringing to them. It just made me think of all the times I'd heard the phrase essential services. It was like, I think this is pretty essential too, man. You know?
I get that for sure. That's interesting. So did you guys lean in hard to, I mean, I saw at least one kind of compilation Zoom recording video. Did you lean into recording a lot kind of during the lockdown? Is that an option or?
Not as much as I planned at the beginning. The technical side of things kind of bummed me out. I mean, I can do it. It just takes so much preparation, and one little thing can knock your stream down. I planned this big um, fundraiser show, which I did. I ended up doing it to raise money for my bandmates who aren't working, and we raised a good amount for them there. That was really great, but it was the most, aside from the day before I got married, the most because the day before I got married, it wasn't that I was having doubts about marrying my wife. It was about all the logistics that kept hitting me like several Mack trucks throughout the day that I just wasn't prepared for,
Right.
because I'm terrible at logistics, which is why I need a good manager, but and have a good manager. But that one show where I immediately, when I went live, on the downbeat, one of the cameras overheated, and it was my main camera, and then I was having audio issues, and then an hour and a half later, I had like 5,000 people waiting for me, half on Facebook, half on YouTube. Decided to I had to axe one of those services, and I just decided to go to Facebook, and lost all my YouTube audience. It was just a nightmare, and it was just me, my wife, and my manager in the room trying to, and I'm the only one who can problem solve because I'm the only one that knows anything about this stuff. And I was over my head, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is horrible.
Yeah, that sounds pretty macro. That's a lot going on. Uh, I mean, you're describing everybody who's tried to do a live church service in the 2020 as well. All
Yeah,
these churches, all
thankfully
these
there's a team of people there who, hopefully can share
usually,
the knowledge and the
yeah.
troubleshooting. But man, it's a whole different language to speak. You're just used to walking on stage and grabbing a mic.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's so funny. Did you? I mean, Christmas seems like it's kind of like the time. I mean, you were releasing a good amount of Christmas music. It's funny. My wife Esther was like, she knew. I mean, she knew you. She knows who you are. She was like, yeah, he's a really great singer. He's done all the stuff. That's cool. It's Queen. But then when it became clear to her that you recorded with Amy Grant, it was like
Yeah.
that was paradigm shifting for her. Where she was like, this man, if you can record with a Christmas song with Amy Grant, like you're in the echelon at this point in time. So, I mean, Christmas seems to be kind to you at this point in time. How are you able to do any shows for Christmas at all?
Well, we wanted to do I mean, Christmas is the other kind of two-legged table.
That's the
My
worst
analogy is
table
not going to work.
ever.
Yeah. Most of the year is Queen, and then the other part of the year is Christmas. And because of that, I spend all year in Christmas, because you can't record around Christmas if you want to release music at Christmas, as
True story.
anyone in the recording industry understands. So I'm basically spending most of the year also recording Christmas music. And the year 2019, we had more momentum than ever, and things were, we played 130 shows all year, which was too much. I got to pare it back to something more manageable. But we got to tour with Michael Levy Smith and Amy Grant, and we're great friends with them, and we were planning on doing it again in 2020, and then couldn't do that. And then we've talked to them about possibly doing it again this year, but with the unsureness and them being, I don't know, less needing of the work than I am. They weren't ready to commit to a Christmas tour, early enough for us to say, yeah, we'd want to do that. So, we needed an answer from them like early in the year. And so we decided, like, if we can't for sure have a tour with them, let's just kind of do whatever Queen gigs come around. And that's all I'm doing in December, really. And Michael and Amy are actually doing a tour. So maybe I'll rejoin them hopefully next year. Hopefully things are more back to normal.
Does Queen have Christmas music?
They have one Christmas music.
Can you use music in the singular? What is it? I feel like I should know it.
Called Thank God It's Christmas, which actually was the title of my last year's Christmas EP, which is the EP on which I recorded that song.
Thank God it's Christmas.
It's not. I mean, I hear it on the radio every now and then.
Okay.
It's not one of the stalwarts of Christmas.
Yeah.
It's very synth heavy. It's very programmy, like early '80s programmy.
Okay.
Maybe it was late '70s. It's the very beginning of synths, and it's not my favorite Queen song, but I produced it myself. I kind of went more in a gospel-y choir approach, way more organic. And but yeah, they have one Christmas song. So if we did a Queen Christmas tour, it'd be pretty short.
So check that one out. I mean, yeah, synthy Christmas stuff can work. I mean, obviously, it seemed to do all right for Paul McCartney.
Last Christmas is the epitome of that.
Too.
It's done well. Sure. It's definitely amazing. I mean, it's a great song.
Yeah, no doubt. Fascinating. So then, I mean, you described. Let me flesh out your stool for you. So you've got you've got Queen and you've got the Christmas music, but I mean, you also have like Martel stuff. So you're doing are you still like doing like original material?
With all this stuff that dropped out, the bottom dropped out on the last few weeks, I've spent a lot more time writing. The urgency, I've got to figure out a way to give myself more urgency, because the urgency that I had when Down Here was the thing is just not there anymore. I don't have to write to survive, which is a nice thing, but also a lot less motivating. I still do enjoy writing, and I'm still looking for things to say, as we all are. And I did, the last big thing I released of original music was my solo album, and that's already been 6 or 7 years now. Right. And I'm still super proud of that record. It was a lot of me dealing with out in the open, what it's like to constantly being compared to someone else. And I think I've said my piece in that, and I need to move on to other things and more accessible topics. And and being so much in the Queen world, a lot of that comes out in my music just from osmosis, really. And but I'm still trying to find my solo sound. It took years for Down Here to find our sound as a band. I mean, it took us 3 records. Our first 2 records, the first one you have all your life to write for. The second one, you have not even close of enough time to write for it, and it ends up being like a hodgepodge of. And a lot of people liked our second record, but the third record's really where we're like, oh, this is what our band sounds like. We've got this now.
Which one is that? What's the title on that one?
It's called Wide-Eyed and Mystified.
Yeah, I think of that as the when I say ultimate, I don't mean like you peaked there, but I mean like that's kind of like the most definitive sounding one. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and then the next one, which is Ending is Beginning, I think was our best record. So we got one with our sound under the belt, and then the next one we're like, okay, we got this, and that was the album that nabbed me a wife. So yeah, I guess I haven't really recorded enough original stuff on my own to really know. Like the problem is that I find that I can basically sing most genres, and I enjoy singing most genres. Rock's always the main thing, but I'm trying to find a place for rock these days, and maybe that's the wrong approach to wonder where you fit in, and just do your thing. I think that's what I need to keep telling myself.
I've often kind of thought about this. I haven't thought about it in a long time because it's not where I spend most of my brain power these days, but it did dawn on me at one point where I was like, growing up, you and I are close to the same age, but growing up, it was very much like I didn't have a lot of people that I looked to that were performers, but were not also writers. Most of my like musical heroes were either singer-songwriters, or they were in bands or whatever. Like their names were on the songs, even if they might have had like a lot of help in the background, like no doubt, like they were somehow contributors to this. But that is I don't want to say it's like a new phenomenon, but there was a huge swath of time where that was not the case. Like when you look at some of the classics of what they did was they took songs that were either pre-existing or written for them,
Yep.
and brought their vocal artistry to it, and that was what made the song. Like their contribution was not just their physical voice, but their metaphorical voice too when they brought it.
That is actually the one of the biggest conversations that's ongoing between my manager and I. And like you, like all the music that I grew up listening to was singer-songwriters. And I didn't think that divorcing the two was even a thing. Like, but then if you do, you look at artists like Elvis and Sinatra, they didn't write any of their stuff.
No.
Um, and that's one thing that Josh, my manager, tries to encourage me every now and then. He's like, you don't have to be a songwriter. I'm like, but that's kind of my identity is tied up in being a songwriter. You get, like, no one I knew, like you just said, like no musician grows up thinking I'm going to sing someone else's songs.
Right.
You want to write your own songs, and so that's the path that I took, and the fact that I was able to put a band together and survive solely on our own songs
Oh, hi,
for
kid.
13 years is pretty great. You know, I know what it feels like to do that, and now that I'm straddling both worlds, well, one foot is much more in the tribute world for sure. It's
What's your cat's name?
Bijou.
Bijou, mon chéri. Uh, do you have a foot in the what you might call the CCM world at all anymore?
Christmas time, and
Okay.
that's essentially it these days.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of goodwill there, and we've had for the past 6 years. Every year we put out a Christmas song every year, and every year it's gone in top 10. We've had one number one with Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith. This year, the song we serviced to CCM was a cover of Chris Rice's "Welcome to Our World"
Whoa.
with Lee Nash of Sixpence None the Richer.
Oh, I saw that. Yes, that's awesome. She's also epic. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love her voice.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, I'm not. This is not a hot take conversation. That's not how we roll. But I am curious, and I can always just say next. But like, have you had any struggles, um, being able to hold both of those kind of like identities or worlds together? So like, I watched the Queen biopic recently. He just that doesn't seem like Freddie Mercury was the kind of guy who would have like thrived in the CCM market, put it that way. So to be able to play a lot of his stuff and to be able to live in that world, is that a tension at all?
Next. No, no, man. That at first it was, coming from 13 years of mostly preaching to the choir. Um, yeah, it was a transition for me for sure to figure out, okay, because the lyrics of songs is everything to me. It's like I gotta me in every single thing I sing. Thankfully, in the pantheon of Queen hits, it's just a lot of just fun and weird and storytelling. There's not a whole lot of super offensive stuff. And and I was expecting a lot of blowback actually from my CCM fans when the whole thing started in 2012, 2011. And I only had like literally two people come up to me at Downhere shows saying, you know, my kids listen to every single word. Please don't sing the songs of Freddie Mercury, that one lady said to me. And I was like, I'm sorry, we just kind of fundamentally disagree on this, and but there was one song that I wouldn't sing, well, that I don't sing in its entirety even to this day, which is a top five probably for Queen, is Bicycle Race. It literally takes the Lord's name in vain twice.
Right.
Now we can go into the philosophy of what it actually means to take the Lord's name in vain, but I I would hurt too many just really lovely believers, I think, from just singing those lyrics carelessly. And so for the longest time, I wouldn't even touch that song, and now I've kind of chopped it up and kept the good parts, and I'd perform just those two verses and then move on to the next song, kind of thing.
Right.
But I don't know, bigger picture. I just find that the people that come to our shows are just big music fans, and I'm a big music fan. And I did not grow up probably like you. I don't think either of us grew up in a really Christian environment, in a very, like, now I do. I live, or at least when I was with Down Here, and we're living in Nashville, Tennessee, the Bible Belt, buckle, and performing in churches all the time. But that's not how I grew up. Like, I grew up going to public school. I grew up being in the very small minority of Bible believing Christians among my friends. Like in elementary, high school, besides a few youth group friends that I only knew them because we went to the same youth group, none of my friends were Christians. And so we all listened to the same music. We all, listened to like Guns N' Roses, and then Pearl Jam, and all that stuff. And it's just normal for me to have to be in the world and not of it, and enjoy it, and not calling the things that come from the world evil. I think that's such a unhelpful way to look at things. And so yeah, for me, it's not a problem. I don't really, there's no war in my spirit about it. I'm myself wherever I go. I don't apologize for anything. And I think people, at least the people who spend a lot of time with me, like my band members and fans who stick around for a long time, they get to know the real me. So that's all that matters to me.
That's awesome. That's good. I didn't know. Okay, it's interesting to hear you got a little, like, just a little bit of blowback. That's helpful. I actually did. I did go to public school, but I also kind of grew up in a bit of a. I didn't grow up in a bubble, but let's just say I listened to. Do you remember when Christian bookstores used to have like the, if you like
Yeah,
9 Inch Nails, you might
yeah.
like Skillet. So like I was more of the like I could. They were giving me. I was getting the Skillet instead of the 9 Inch Nails, but I do know Guns N' Roses. I'm a little bit. So, uh, and Quebec would have been a real different world than New Brunswick would have been as well. I would dare
Yeah,
say.
that's true. Quebec is so post-Christian, post-Catholic, really. There was so much shenanigans um, committed on the general population by the Catholic Church in the early days of Quebec, that I don't blame them for having hard feelings towards anything that smacks of Christianity. But I'm a pastor's son, and um, there's always tiny, relatively small churches. There's like maybe one or two mega churches in Quebec. And when you say mega church in Quebec, that's like what, a couple thousand people. Um,
When you
so,
say a couple thousand people at a church in Nashville, you say most
oh
street corners.
yeah, right.
I remember that was just so baffling for me the first time we drove down there, and we were just going down like a country road, like from Nashville down to Franklin or whatever, and it was just we were looking one way. I go, look at the size of that church, and then somebody had to tap me on the shoulder to be like, "But there, did you look on this side of the road?" Like, oh my gosh, and that is not our experience, right? It's but you've lived in Nashville for how long now? 12 years?
20.
20 years, man. So you have not yet tipped the scale, but you're getting close to tipping the scale of having been in the States for nearly as long as you have been not in the States.
Getting there, getting pretty
Yeah,
close. I think
yeah.
it'll be when I turn, hang on, 45 now. Moved here when I was 23. So, I mean, next year or the year after, we'll be tipping the
Yeah,
scale.
that's wild.
It's home, man. And we moved around a few times when I was in Canada. So I've lived in the same 10-mile radius for the last 20 years. And, growing up, we lived in 3, 4 different, very separate towns. So this is the longest I've been in one spot by far. So even there, this is home.
When was the last time you were back to Quebec?
Got to see my parents a few months ago. because we actually had some shows in Quebec. We had 3 shows, and every time I go to Quebec, I try to see my parents. So
Sure.
that was real nice. But yeah, I hadn't seen them since 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild the spending some time in the States. I guess I mean it's been a decade. It's been a decade since I lived there. Um, and I had traveled a lot as in my like late teens and early 20s, kind of up and down the seaboard. So I've been to a lot of the spent a few months in North Carolina once, and so I've seen a lot of the states. I remember traveling to Alabama when I was younger, but actually like living in Nashville for 2 years, that was when I had an opportunity to get to know people, like to really kind of build relationships with. Like my wife was working at a school there, and so like you weren't just interacting with people in restaurants and at concert venues, but like you were like making friendships and then spending protracted time with these people. And it was a real shift in mentality for me as somebody who grew up in Canada. I'll be careful here, but it had been easy to sometimes think people who lived south of the Mason-Dixon line just had a different, like they were just different. Like they viewed the world in different ways politically. They viewed the world in different ways sociologically. Like they just had a really, really different vantage point. And you could almost just say, well, that's just be, and you could insert all these different kind of reasons as to why. And it was easy to just kind of other them and just kind of, you think this way until you actually start to get to know them and then have not just brief conversations but deep ongoing conversations with them, and you start to realize, oh, actually we're not fundamentally different. Like we're not a different species of people. We actually have the same kind of genetic code, and we share a whole boatload of stuff.
Hmm.
So when you look up around, I'm not going to ask you to comment on Canada, but like there's a there's a divide. Like you're seeing a lot of divides. I'm sure you see divides within your own city, frankly. But how are you when you do kind of look north of you? Is are you what are you seeing in terms of how things are being kind of projected to the media? In which how about this? How does a Nashvilleian at this point in time think of the average Canadian? Like, what do we look like to you guys?
Uh, I mean, that depends who you ask, honestly. Um,
I'm asking you, Mark.
yep, yep. What I mean, but yeah, you're asking a guy who grew up in Canada and has a lot of love for Canada. And now that I'm a dual citizen, I've really gotten deep into at least some aspects of the American psyche, and I'm proud to be American as well. Also proud to be Canadian. I think it comes down to priorities. My brother lives in Australia, and
Oh, is Dave in Australia now?
yeah, he's been there for at least 5 years. Lives in Melbourne. He's a worship pastor.
Oh, good for him. However, Australia would be
Yeah,
they make Canada look like the we're living easy.
exactly. And if
Yeah.
you compare two sort of Western countries that couldn't be probably more diametrically opposed right now, I look at Australia and it kind of feels like Canada's Australia light right now as far as political things go. And to me, really what it comes down to is what people place as their highest priority. And um, in America, it tends to be personal freedom as the highest priority. Like anything anything else comes after that.
Mhm.
And in countries like Australia and probably in Canada as well, I think the top priority is probably personal safety. Um, I will give up some freedom as long as I feel like I'm taken care
Mhm.
of. And that's not true of everyone, but I think that might be the driving forces between how divided things are right now. And even in the States, you have people who would flip those two priorities. And in the South, happen to meet more people who value freedom and are willing to give up safety to have personal freedom and to do what they want as human beings. Um, I guess to me, that's what it comes down to, and I understand both sides. That's the beauty of traveling all over the world with what we do or what I do now. You get so many different perspectives, and you get to meet. the people who actually live inside those perspectives and understand what makes them tick and understand that we're not that different anyway. So
Yeah. Thanks for rubbing in the fact that I don't travel very much.
yeah, I know.
It's great.
I know.
I appreciate
It's pretty great. You're missing a lot.
it. It's actually funny. March of 2020. This is the longest time I've been in New Brunswick in my life. I mean, I've lived here. This has been home base since I was 5 years old. But like I've been, I lived in British Columbia and I lived lots of places. But this is the longest time. It's been like I went to Nova Scotia for like 5 minutes, what it feels like a little while ago. But like I've been here for a good haul. But in March of 2020, I was in Italy, so I was in Venice when the outbreak was like you couldn't get into certain.
You were in Venice
museums.
at the beginning of. Oh wow!
Yeah, my wife and I, we had our
ground zero.
Yeah, and I think I'm okay. I think I survived. But that was the last international travel that we did, and it was a doozy. But yeah, no.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, I was in southern Germany at the time that I got sick and lost my voice, and the Germans, or is it Italy? Italy says about Germany that they got the big outbreak from southern Germany.
Oh.
I mean, how can you tell which way the disease is going? It's like maybe it's coming from Italy and going to Germany. Who knows? But,
whatever helps them sleep at night, man. That's
exactly.
Growing up in church? I mean, did you play like worship in church?
Yeah. Man, she is shedding like crazy.
That's Bijou, not his wife, by the way. If anybody's listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, my mom is the piano player in my dad's church. She has been in all my life, and so I led hymns in church a few times. It wasn't something I did super regularly, but I was in the choir and everything. Worship leading, I definitely got more into when I went off to Bible college.
Yeah. But you've never been like a staffer at a church, eh?
Nope. I always thought that of us two Martel brothers, the one that would have ended up on staff at a church would definitely be me, and definitely not my brother, if anyone knows my brother. But life's funny, man.
Yeah.
And he enjoys it.
That's good. That's great, man. Yeah, this is the time of the year when it's usually the most fun and most challenging to be a staff worship pastor. It's Christmas, eh? Ooh,
yeah. How are we going to top last year?
I got it. We'll bring in Martel. He's the clincher. He'll be our best one. Awesome, dude. This has been really great. I mean, I've appreciated your candor and your time, and just kind of letting us know how we can fix everything up here in Canada. It's great.
Yep.
Lift that quote out of context and just.
Bye, everybody. Great talking to you, Mark.